Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We will go ahead and call the June 27th board meeting of our Cobb County Board of Elections to order. And hopefully everyone has the agenda, and we will start with the first item on the agenda, public comment. I believe there's only one person. Actually, is Kendra here? No, she's not here. Kendra's not here, but she did send an email that there wasn't anyone that signed up for virtual. Okay, so here in the chambers with us, I believe this is Robbie Huck, Mr. or Mrs. Huck. Yes. Yes, please come up. And just, I don't know that I've ever seen you here before. Welcome. But I will note that we do have a 5-minute limit per speaker, and the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm not going to take 5 minutes. My name is Robbie Huck. I live within the city limits of Marietta, and I was here, I guess you were absent. It was the end of May when the first time the primary numbers were certified. Mm-hmm. And I'm here about the same issue. On the Cobb Elections website, there is, I looked at the primary runoff election results, and there's a report called Details of the TXT version. And the numbers presented there, I question what they represent. Because in the report starts off with a block of numbers by precinct, and it has total ballots cast. It'll say registered voters, ballots cast, percentage turnout. So this time I just looked at the precinct for Ackworth 1A because it's the first one. Mm-hmm. And it said that on the runoff, 164 ballots were cast. So the first race presented in this report is the Democrat lieutenant governor's race. There, the total ballots cast were 162. And so then I jumped down to the nonpartisan race where Judge Brown was a candidate. Total ballots cast were 223. It's a report, it says it's a report, but I don't know what it's reporting. And I think in this era where everyone is questioning the integrity of the system we use, that if there's going to be a report, it should say something. But anyway, I appreciate your time, and I do respect and I'm inspired by your courage to stand on the board and serve the people. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ms. Huck. So moving on to the next item on our agenda, the approval of the minutes. We have a number of meeting minutes that we need to approve. I guess my first question for my colleagues, have you all had an opportunity to review the not the amended minutes, the minutes? Yeah. And with respect to all of them, as noted on the agenda, items A through F, does anyone have any comments or questions with respect to or proposed revisions to the meeting minutes? If there are none, I will accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes, and to the extent that anyone has any objections, you can let me know. But if there are no proposed revisions, then I suggest that we just approve them in all via one motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes, items A through F.
As noted on the agenda, is there a second? Second. Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the meeting minutes as noted, A through F on our agenda. All those in favor, or for that matter, just vote yay or nay. Okay, thank you. All the meeting minutes have been approved. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, the directors, the June 21st general primary special election runoff. Ms. Heveler, we'll have your report now.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman. Before you, you have the report from election night, which again, as you've seen many times this year already, is our standard format to track the same kind of data points throughout each election, so we can kind of get a running trend on how it goes. So that is up on the screen as well for those who are here in attendance or online. The first precinct in is Marietta 4B. They are actually a stellar group there at Marietta 4B. They came in at 7:45, quite a good turnaround. And they were part of the first group that was uploaded, which included Pittner 01, which happened to be the first precinct uploaded at 9:17. The last group in, the last precinct in was Austell 1B at 10:31. Still not as late as we have seen in the past, so you know, they got in at 10:30 and we had them uploaded by 11. We had no items left at the polls where they had to go back and get anything. The absentee was uploaded and released at 7:25 and the mail at 8:45. And we were complete by around midnight. The staff left at midnight and the managers shortly after that at 12:15 in the morning. The turnout was 6.6%, as you see, with a total ballots cast of 34,477. Of the provisional ballots, 56 were issued and 43 of those were able to be counted. In the absentee mail and advance voting area, you'll see for each category the mail and electronic, which is a portion of mail, but it is delivered electronically to uniformed overseas military. So the total of those cast is over there on the right, and the total counted equaled 13,027 of all those categories. You also have in front of you the election summary report, official and complete. This is the results from all of the ballots that were tabulated. And at this point, after you review these items, I would ask that you certify the June 22nd, 2022 general primary runoff.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Evelyn? Okay.
Janine, I always have questions about the provisionals that we've rejected and the reasons. The reasons that we've rejected provisionals.
Okay, so there's a number of reasons, but oftentimes it's that they really aren't registered. So when somebody submits a provisional ballot at the poll, they may believe that they have registered, but after researching, we found that there was no transaction that took place, or they registered too late after the deadline. There are sometimes issues where the paperwork that they submit is not complete, because there are certain things that are required with the provisional ballot. For an out-of-precinct provisional ballot, they do have to submit an affidavit now, attesting that they can't get to their correct precinct, and it has to be issued after 5 p.m. If they are casting an out-of-precinct ballot before 5 p.m., there is no provision for us to count it.
So if I could just follow up on that, given that that time, kind of minimum time standard is there, are our poll workers advised not to issue the affidavit prior to 5 p.m., such that there should never be an affidavit or a provisional ballot that's received?
Well, the poll workers are advised to tell the voters what the rules are.
Okay,
And then to let the voter decide.
I see.
So there's never a refusal to issue anything from the
Okay.
poll workers. That wouldn't be something we'd want them to do.
Right, but so what you're sharing is that I showed up at 4:55. I was advised to submit this for my provisional ballot to be counted. I must complete this affidavit, but I can only submit it after 5 p.m. if I, notwithstanding the fact that the poll worker advised me of that, I went ahead and completed the affidavit, cast my provisional ballot, to the extent it was, quote, received prior to 5 PM, it still wouldn't be counted.
Yeah,
Okay.
the law precludes us from counting it.
I definitely understand that the law precludes us from counting it, and I'm not suggesting that we train our poll workers to do anything else, but I can see, notwithstanding the poll worker having shared with that voter that their ballot would not be, it's not valid, it won't be accepted because it's received prior to 5 PM. We're still accepting it. Well, we're not accepting it, we're receiving it. So.
Right, we are.
Okay.
And unless the board directs differently, but that's what we're doing.
Okay. I don't know whether anyone else has a question or concern about that. It just, to the extent that it is not going to be received, or I'm sorry, it's not going to be accepted, it's going to be rejected because it's not within that 5, or it's not received after 5 PM, why even have there's a part of me that just wonders, why even have the voter complete it? I understand we don't want to refuse to provide a ballot. That's probably going to create a whole other,
Well,
can of worms.
And it
but-
is in some ways a mitigation of a situation where the poll workers would be placed in
An
a
awkward
position that
situation.
they
Understood.
are not comfortable with, and the voters sometimes are insistent that they get to cast that ballot, even though you're explaining the rules to them.
Understood.
They insist upon it, and you don't want to have to say, I'm sorry,
Right.
we're not going to take it. So in those cases, it diffuses the situation a little bit, even though, we've made it clear.
Okay, got it.
Could I guess, make a comment? We have so much signage at our polling locations. I hesitate to add this as an additional sign at some point, depending on placement. I don't know whether that would help with understanding or make it even seem more official or clearer in our voters' minds. But is that a possibility? Do we already have any type of signage, the same way we have signage for seniors above 75 and older?
Well, it would only apply to the few voters that end up at the provisional station, so
Right.
it wouldn't be something we'd want it to have a general signage for.
Right.
The affidavit itself, it states this
On there.
as well, so providing that they are reading what they're signing, that it would be in that
Sure.
document.
So that's just a point of emphasis to carefully read the affidavit.
Yeah.
I think, just from my own experience, is it's actually what's most valuable is for the poll workers to have the knowledge of how to help them look up where they need to go. Because I think a lot of people are insistent that, though this is my poll, this was my poll, maybe it was at some point and they've moved, but it's before 5 o'clock. And so, if we're able to help them get to where they need to be, that's actually probably more beneficial than saying, no, you can't have a provisional, but here's how, and I think we do have that resource. It's more just kind of like elevating that in the training component for people who are working the poll pads and checking in voters, making sure that they know. And we had for a while like MVP on a QR code. I don't know if I saw that this time, but we had that on a stanchion on the QR code so people could just use their phone and look up right away. That was really helpful. I did direct people, especially when the lines were long and you couldn't take a lot of time when you were talking to a voter and help them look it up. But I would say maybe if we went back to that kind of thing is helpful.
Unfortunately, that QR code's no longer valid. It doesn't go to the new website.
Is that something we can ask the Secretary of State about, or is that?
Well, we could make new signs with the correct QR codes.
Okay, so that came from us specifically.
Well, that sign is our sign, yes.
Okay.
Nobody else does that sign.
Because that was great. We had that stanchion sort of outside of the poll, and I was quickly able to have people go to that and find where they were able to look up versus me trying to help them. That makes sense. But that's probably, Tori, to answer your question, that's probably where the education comes in for the poll workers.
Okay.
Well, and also, when there is a situation where the voter might be casting this out-of-precinct ballot, it does require a phone call to the office. So part of the procedure is that the poll workers call the office to finally determine where that voter should be. There's no presumption that they know how to direct somebody. So if they're getting to the point where, they believe that this person should be voting an out-of-precinct provisional, they do call the office so that we can verify that.
Great.
So I'm sorry, they stop and make a phone call to the office as opposed to using MVP via
No,
the QR?
no, they still direct the person to their
MVP.
precinct. But if the voter wants to vote out of precinct,
I
they do
understand.
call. There is a
Okay.
call as part of the procedure. So if the information that the poll workers is giving to redirect that voter is not correct, or they haven't redirected them properly, and now they're at the point where they're doing an out-of-precinct provisional, then we're going to check on that first. So there's an oversight to that,
What are you what are you validating?
that the voter really is out of precinct and they've been, it's been addressed where they should go and redirected, and then that they truly are understanding that they're voting out of precinct and what the implications of that are. They won't necessarily have all the same races on their ballot. So it's just an informative thing for the voter. So again, if the voter is insisting on a provisional ballot and it's 4:30, we'll be able to be part of that conversation.
Understood, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
Anything else?
that's happening at the provisional station.
Right.
Right, that's not happening at the check-in.
Check-in,
So
right,
that's when
okay.
they're at the provisional station.
Okay. Anyone else have anything further on this item? No? Okay. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the summary, as well as additional information such that if there's no unreadiness, I entertain a motion to certify the election results for the June 21 general primary special election runoff?
I move to certify the June 21st primary runoff election.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Gartland. All those in favor to certify the June 21 runoff election results, if you'll denote as much. And it's unanimous, thank you. And we'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Avila.
All right, thank you. So in your agenda, you have what looks like an Excel spreadsheet, which is something that Mr. Bruning asked me to prepare several meetings ago, and we ended up having to table it several times. But this was an analysis of the advanced voting availability in several other counties that are contiguous to Cobb. And this was before the May 24th primary, and what each of these counties had published on their websites for their availability of advanced voting. And we were looking to compare our offering to the contiguous counties. So just as a summary of all of this information, I did look at, locations offered. In the way of locations, Fulton by far had the most with 30 locations, and then DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Cobb, which are similar in size, had between 10 and 14 locations, and all the other counties that were assessed had between 2 and 7 locations. Looking at hours of offering, the three, I guess, almost big-sized counties, DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Cobb, offered 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and all the other counties, including Fulton, had somewhat less hours per day. On the Saturday hours, just to remind everybody, the minimum that's required on Saturdays is 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Gwinnett was the only county that offered 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 5 counties added up to an hour to that, a half an hour to an hour to the minimum, either on the early side or on the end after 5. And then 5 counties stuck to the minimum available. As far as Sundays, on the first Sunday, 8 counties were closed, including us. Gwinnett was open 7 to 7, Fulton from 9 to 6, and DeKalb for an afternoon 12 to 5. And then on the second Sunday, 6 were closed, also including us. Gwinnett, Fulton, and DeKalb, the other 3 big ones besides us, they stayed open on the same hours that they were open on the first Sunday, And in addition, Clayton and Forsyth opened on the second Sunday with afternoon hours. What I did on the totals column, the availability, and then the area coverage, those columns, I was looking at a way that we could measure against each other with some kind of a formula. So what I did is I took the population of voters and divided it by the total number of hours of availability. And in that category, we were 8th out of the 11 counties that were looked at. And in the far column with the area coverage, I looked at how big the counties were, so their square miles divided by the number of locations that they offered. And in that way, we were 5th out of the 11 counties. So somewhat in the middle.
This is good. Thank you.
I have also, moving forward, a look at what we're looking at for November, but I will stop at this point and ask if you have questions on this.
I guess the question that is the root of this is.
Turn your mic on, Steve.
Sorry, I guess the question that's at the root of this is November is going to be a very high turnout election. Do we need additional locations to provide the proper coverage? I mean, I look at the map. In East Cobb, we only have 2 locations, and that's a big population area.
Would you like to move to that now?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so CP, if you'll put up the map. Okay, so in the agenda, there is a proposed map and also a proposed flyer of hours and information. So what we have for November is reservations for 12 locations. And on the last week, we'll add 1 additional location for a total of 13. And this is how they distribute across the county. Your comment about East Cobb may be true, but we don't have another place out there at this point.
Do we have any potential additional options we can look at that maybe we've not inquired with as of yet for
We ha-
November?
Yeah, not that I know of.
Okay.
If you have another that you would like us to look at, we can.
Okay. I didn't know whether, I mean, obviously these 2 elections, the primary and the primary runoff, have taken place over the summer, and I know during the summer there are limitations with regard to certain facilities that aren't necessarily available because of summer activities. And so, yes, perhaps leverage those locations that we used this go-round, or, you know, this election cycle, but perhaps there might be an opportunity in light of the fact that we won't be in the summer months in the month of November to perhaps find an additional location in East Cobb, as Mr. Bruning has suggested.
And my actual concern is the Whitlock office. Is there any option to still continue that as we transition? Like, people are so used to voting at that as the main office. I personally, when I looked at this, that was my biggest concern, was would we still potentially be able to offer voting at least through November, through this cycle at Whitlock?
I suppose we could, but I'm not sure that would help people transition to the new location. I mean, we would probably have to staff that bigger than at our new location.
I couldn't understand what you said.
I
We would
was-
have to start that. We would have to
Staff, we would
it.
have to put more staff at the old location than at the new location. If people are used to it, that's just where they'll go.
That's my concern, is that that is where
understand.
people are really used to voting in this county, and that we need an adequate sort of time frame to educate voters. You know, it's like, this November is certainly going to be a high turnout election. I feel like it might be something that we want to transition maybe in some of the smaller elections, have more time to get that information out for voters to know that we've moved, work out the kinks with parking at Mansour. But I think my personal thought is that, people go there even if they have a location that's closer to them because they just are so used to in this county that being open.
Yes. Okay.
I'm open to other people's thoughts. I'm just, having worked that location, knowing how voters' patterns, it's hard to change, hard to turn that ship. I just know that voters, they'll drive past other locations to come to Whitlock and even stand in that line, even when I'll tell them, hey, you could go here and it wouldn't be 3 hours. It's like a security blanket. I hate to see that go away so quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, I talked to Janine about this because I had a number of calls where they had moved, they had to close, I think it was Miller Park or whatever it was, and the guy, two of the people went right by the place they were supposed to. They got notes on it, and there were signs. And so I don't think no matter what we do, we're going to get them to wake up and say, oh, I'm not supposed to be here this time. That's just...
You're saying no matter what we do, it's unlikely that we'll get them to
Yeah, it's
understand that
old
they're
habit.
not
You know,
supposed to be at Whitlock, they're supposed to be at Mansour?
Yeah, the guy, and the one guy said, well, I did go by it, and I guess I did get a piece of paper to tell me that it was moved. I said, what are you calling me for then? But that's just one of those things. Can I ask another
Of
question?
course, absolutely.
All right, on the drop boxes, where will these will be in places that they'll get the people, and they will sign in, or what do they do when they put it in the drop box?
So the drop boxes are inside the advanced voting
That's what I wanted to
locations,
hear.
and they're open only during advanced voting hours. And we selected the ones that have the stars. Obviously, if you want to move them somewhere else, we can move them.
Well, no, hey,
Yeah.
just so I wanted to make sure that they had someone there.
Right.
So,
That actually raises a question, though, because if we are suggesting that we don't have the new location and presently it's noted as a Dropbox location, so that would potentially be moved back to, the Dropbox location obviously would go back to Whitlock if that's ultimately what's determined, correct or no?
Yeah, and I did mean to mention that we don't have to decide on this today. I'm just looking for your feedback in relation to the study that we did.
Sure.
And so any of your comments, we'll certainly take them back and look at what can be done, given that what you want to do.
Are you in a position to share with us the number of votes that were cast? And if it's already in this information, you can let me know. But the number of votes that were cast at Whitlock?
I am not in a position to
Not
give
right
it to
this
you today,
moment, but
I
if you could
certainly-
share that with us,
certainly.
because I think that will be informative as to the point that Jennifer raised.
Yes, we can certainly give you a statistical breakdown.
Okay.
And I wanted to add one other comment to what Jennifer said, because, and in response to what Pat said, I know that transition is going to be difficult no matter what, but I think this year everyone is looking, and they've proven through the primary participation that they are really looking to even November. And I think that a greater number of our voters would be impacted in November if we choose not to be at Whitlock. And maybe we want to get into the municipal cycle, that would come maybe the following year, but that would be better. But I think definitely this year there will be far more impacted than would be in the next election cycle.
Can I ask your thoughts about having Whitlock be the only central location and not the new location, the new building? Or are you saying to open both?
My personal opinion is Whitlock for this location. And then as we finish out this election cycle with the consistency. I know I use that word all the time, but I feel like that would make sense for me logically to keep Whitlock as the primary location for this cycle. And I don't see it being necessary to have Mansour in addition. That's my personal.
kind of like the old habit. They're going to come to Whitlock anyhow.
And that's me for this election cycle. That's my opinion.
So that raises, I think that raises other questions under the law with respect to whether, I mean, how is the location identified? Because, I mean, is it identified, or at what point will it be identified as our main office? Because if my recollection is correct, there are certain requirements with respect to, quote, the main office. And so are we in a position to press pause on the designation of Monsoor as being our main office?
Well, there is some pressure to get us out of the existing buildings
From whom?
from the county manager and the county government. We are in multiple different buildings that we need to consolidate, and so I would have to ask again as to when Whitlock is being turned over to someone else. I'm sure they would make a concession for voting there. Your point about the law is something that maybe Daniel can check into, because we have gotten different answers on that.
Right.
We always thought that the main office had to be open, but in the last go-round where we were doing the HD 45, there was word that we didn't have to have the main office open, and that came from the Secretary of State. So I'm not certain what the answer to that is.
Okay. Daniel, anything you can share with us, either today or we can look
Yeah, I can,
to share?
I'm reading through it now. If I,
Okay.
I'll keep scrolling, but it may be in the regulations. I'm looking at the statute right now, but don't see it immediately, but.
Okay. And even in the event you can't share it today, I just, if we could get some additional
Yeah.
feedback. Obviously, we're not making the determination today or the decision today, so.
And I'd like to say I appreciate this very early start to a very important election.
Thank you.
I had one other question. The location that's open the last week only is Jim Miller Park. It looks awfully centrally located. What's the reason we only open it one week instead of the same as the rest?
That's all that they had available.
That's all they had available.
Right.
Okay. So now I must probably get on the consistency bandwagon. Is there,
Thank you.
is there perhaps another centrally located option that could be open all 3 weeks or?
The other one that we checked was the Civic Center, and they were open even fewer days than
Okay.
Jim Miller Park.
Okay.
And these were, just to let you know, this was something that we checked at the beginning of the
Okay.
year, of this year. In January, we were getting these reservations, and they were already booked.
They're already booked, okay. All right. We definitely appreciate to echo Jessica, we appreciate the diligence early in the process.
And then the other item that you have is the kind of the draft of the flyer, which shows the different locations and the drop boxes that are depicted on the map. And then the first draft of the hours and the dates. I realized this morning that we had Saturday 9 to 5. We actually would do that. We were proposing 8 to 5 on Saturdays, since that's what we also did on the May primary.
Okay.
But again, we're looking for feedback from you on that as well.
And I know we did not have, as you described in the summary that you provided via the Excel spreadsheet, and thank you, Steve, for asking for that. I think it's very helpful to kind of provide concise information, and we can compare what we're doing to what the adjoining counties are doing. I know we did not have any Sunday voting for the primary nor the primary runoff. Was there any consideration that you and your team discussed about Sunday voting, recognizing that we anticipate a larger turnout for the general election?
That is something that the team has discussed, of course, and They wanted me to go in with the proposal of no Sundays, to give people that as their rest day.
Sure.
Obviously, it is, they recognize, and we all recognize, that it is a board decision on whether we do Sundays or not.
Okay. I don't have anything further. Does anyone have anything further for consideration? I mean, obviously, again, we're not voting today, but.
Janine, are there any stats on I think there are, by hour on Saturdays, in terms of like, if we're looking at the 9 to 5 versus 8, like, you've got 9 to 5 on this flyer, but then you were saying 8 to 5 is what you're thinking for November? And is that based on what you've seen in the past with turnout?
No, we just thought, and this was what we did in the primary, that we wanted to give people more than the minimum.
Yeah.
And so we did 8 to 5 on the primary. Other counties did 9 to 6. And
Right, that's,
and
I
put it
saw
on the
that, I was
end.
wondering if we thought 9 to 6 might be a better, when I looked at that, I was like, oh, 9 to 6 might be more useful. I don't know what everybody thinks about that, as opposed to 8 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about a Saturday morning, I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are. And I obviously, believe in voting, but are they voting, are you going to get any turnout or a considerable amount of turnout to, kind of justify the investment of your staff and our team's time to be there on the front end from 8 to 9, or is it a situation where people are our staff may want to get home to their family and friends and not be there from that 5 to 6 p.m. hour?
Anecdotally, without any data to give you, we find that a lot of times it drops off in the afternoon, because there's kids' ball games and other things that they do on Saturday afternoons. So it's usually earlier.
Okay.
But, I mean, that's just from kind of anecdotal observations.
Right. And I, again, commend the team for wanting to provide more than what's required. However, to Ms. Mossbacher's question, if we could have any type of data or statistics as to the turnout, the number of votes that are being cast between that 8 to 9 a.m. hour, to really determine whether it's worth the investment of our staff's time.
We'll certainly look at what we can provide.
Okay.
Because it does look like Gwinnett, Fulton, and DeKalb all look at the 9 to 6. I mean, Gwinnett's open 7 to 7, but on Saturday. But it looks like that's the other metro
6.
is 9 to 6. So I don't know, just from a looking around the county, maybe we can see. But I hear what you're saying. If it drops off in the afternoons, I mean, we could kind of look at that first hour and that last hour and see what makes sense.
The other thing is.
Whether either one of them makes sense too.
Right, exactly.
I mean, because it's not like we're going above what is required, but again, is above what is required. I don't want to say necessary, because yes, it's necessary to provide, as great of an opportunity as possible to vote. But if we're having 2 voters that are coming in between the hours of 8 and 9, if you're able to identify this, and 2 voters between 5 and 6, and again, not to disenfranchise anyone, those two on the back end, 2 on the front end, but if we communicate the hours out, maybe it just needs to be open from 9 to 5.
Well, the other minor comment is.
Will you turn on your mic? Oh, sorry.
The other minor comment is that we'll be off of daylight savings time in November.
That's true.
And
That's a very good
the
point.
5 o'clock to 6 o'clock hour is going to be dark. So,
So the 8 to 5 might be better, but we should look at the numbers and see if
Right.
that's.
sure.
Those that have worked the polls know too.
Yeah.
And I hate to mention this being a senior, but I know many seniors who do not desire to drive when it's darker. So I'll just add that to our data discussion.
I'm one of those.
Yeah, you had included us.
Yeah,
You're
it
right.
doesn't include us, but yes, but there are many, and working with the senior council and working with senior services, I hear that all the time.
It's a good
I just
point.
wanted to chime in. I haven't, just on my quick review of the absentee provisions, I don't see it in the statute that the main office, the location of the main office really is just, you do have to allow people to return absentee ballots there. And I didn't see anything specific about Dropbox, having to go to the main office, but there is, as long, in terms of advanced voting, there are requirements that say you have to publish your locations like 14 days in advance on the website and certain things like that. And that makes sense. There are some counties that would have a small enough main office or it's inside their larger county offices that they may not want to use that as their advanced voting place. So I think the way the advanced voting requirements are is as long as you name your primary or your locations that you're going to start with. There's actually a provision in there that I forgot they added that says this is what you do when you add them later. But you don't have to make the main office one from what I can see. I'll check the regulations. I haven't read the Secretary of State's regulations. That may have something else on it, but the statute itself doesn't. But you do have to allow people to drop they can deliver their absentee ballots to the main office. That's
Yeah,
one.
and so to the point that, old habits die hard, I mean, if people are going to drop their absentee ballot off at the main location and they go to the main location, which is Whitlock, and then ultimately they get there and they can't drop it because it's, quote, not the main location, is that person, even if we provide them with directions, and that's what I would suggest we do if we end up going with Mansar, I think we should have written directions that should be provided to them that tell them how to get from Whitlock to Mansour, again, if that's what we're doing. But are they going to take the time to drive from Whitlock to Mansour?
Just a reminder also that any advanced voting location can accept an absentee ballot.
Okay.
That's right.
That's the point I was going to make.
Whether
is
there's
that
a
they can-
Dropbox.
Drop it anyway.
Right, and we could always have the Dropbox at Whitlock still, and the main office can still accept, because there's deputy registrars there able to accept the ballots. So I think.
We can have, but the Dropbox has to, as long as there are folks that are per 202, it has to be inside and,
Right, but if Whitlock is open and a voting location,
okay. Well,
it's
that's,
advanced
that's
voting.
the whole thing. It would have to be a voting location, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'm pretty solid that I think we should try to make sure Whitlock is open.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
November.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay. Any other comments about the advanced voting?
No.
All right, and the other item that was asked for me to provide is a draft of the voter qualification challenges procedures. And so the tab 4B, there's 2 pages there at the end of the agenda with just some steps for the voter challenge process that we would follow. I'm not sure if this is what you were looking for. This is kind of for my benefit as well, of the procedures that I would follow when we receive one. There's probably something else that you're looking for. I'm not sure about what you use to make your decisions. I think is part of where you were going as well, what measures you would take to consider. But I didn't include that.
Okay. No, I think this is a great start. I think that, to the extent that this is something that we publish, and that's obviously a conversation that we would need to have once we determine the content, having like a little grid, if you will, that, so people, well, I don't know, I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but oftentimes if you have like information that, from the date that it's submitted, 3 days to respond, 5 days to do this, 6 days to do that, such that it's information that's kind of easily discernible and digestible.
Some sort of graphic
Graphic,
organizer.
exactly. So, but I do believe that this is a good start. I do wonder, and I think we'd have to, have that conversation as to whether the additional information that Janine was referencing, kind of our rationale, if you will, is something that should be incorporated into this. And then it's a matter of whether that's, whether this is something we publish. Because I think this should be not just for our benefit, I think it's for the benefit of benefit for Janine, but also for the public, as they're the ones that are, submitting the challenges. So that they should have a firm understanding of that process.
And Janine, I browsed this, and under written challenge number 2, a hearing date will be selected. The one thing, again, for clarity's sake, and I know we have some time to consider the wording and the content here, but I know that when we have received the challenge, there is an official receipt of the challenge. So it says, notice of the hearing must be sent within 10 business days of the receipt of the challenge, and would that be at the point that you confirm that it's been received? I think like you've done in the past. So there's no misinterpretation. I sent it on Monday. You said you didn't receive it until Wednesday, and so since those days we're counting the days, just to be clear, to the receipt of the challenge. Yeah, but
Okay, we can add
I'm
that.
really glad that we are on our way to working through what we know we will be facing and what we have faced in the past.
I've read over these this afternoon, and I've got just most of the changes I have to suggest are just formatting and adding things like in receipt, or if, on, just as an example, on 3B, we said the challenge voters should be afforded the opportunity to participate virtually, but we'll say in person or, virtually, just to make it clear. So it's just a lot of little things like that.
And as opposed to should, they shall be afforded. As to whether they avail themselves of it is something completely different, but I think there's a legal obligation for us to afford them the opportunity.
And there's a few other things that are like that, where I might change, like where the board will move to executive session, out to the board may move, you don't
Right.
have to. So there's some things like that, but just what I wanted to ask, two really substantive things, just in terms of, as opposed to formatting or cleaning it up. Like, does the board want to have a total, there's a provision here that says the board may open the floor to public to speak on the challenge. Do you want to limit the total time? We're saying each person has 3 minutes. And I tend to think about this from like the zoning context, and like at Marietta, we give everybody 15 minutes total, put for or against, because you start hearing the same things over and over, and the board doesn't have to hear particularly, you need to give a certain set amount of time to the challenger and to the voter. So you don't have to limit either of those, or you could put like a certain time limit. But there's also something to be said for, do we need 30 people coming in saying the same thing for 3 minutes? So that's just one thing I wanted to just ask is, do you want to put a total time limit, especially like on a meeting like next month, where we're going to have 4 different sets of challenges, because you could, just like if they didn't put the limits on zoning hearings, they would go into the next morning. The other thing I wanted to just, I'm probably going to recommend that we just rearrange how 8 and 9 are stated, just because we want to say they may enter into executive session, and then probably make the next sentence start number 9, where it says if the executive session is approved, and I'll just kind of spell out, because it's really only to discuss pending limitation, but I would just ask for permission at some point to clean that up in 8 and 9.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So I think next steps, if there are any comments, substantive or otherwise, perhaps we share those with Janine via email, and then maybe copy Daniel on those, such that there's no administrative burden on Janine to pass that information along to Daniel and his team. And then if we could potentially try to have a revised draft. I don't know that we'll have it prior to the July 11th meeting. It'd be great if we did.
Well, and that's the last 3 things I'll probably point out here. I think that you do, at some point, if you want to use these, you'll need to adopt them, so you need to vote on them. So
Right.
You could vote on them today, subject to, if you like the substance of these, and just say, and with Janine and council to take, additional, not substantive, you want to, anything that's like a major substantive part, you want to have today, but if I'm thinking, what I don't think you need to do is, like here, I was gonna make the change from if possible to when practicable, because it's always possible to vote on each voter, so there's little things like that I probably want to change. So I think you could approve them today, subject to final, revisions by council and Janine with input. But I would want to, I think you need to either probably include a little preamble statement, just some sort of rationale
Sure.
that you could spell out here, and then we can get it in there. And then you want to probably also say something that we're going to send these bylaws to the challenger so that they know, what they know coming in. So when they get notice of the hearing, they're going to get sent these rules and say, these are the rules you got to follow.
Right, no, that makes sense. To that point, and I don't disagree with anything you've said, Daniel, but I do want to go back to the point that Janine raised with respect to the content. Again, having a preamble and explanatory sections that, provide for, Janine or whomever that's managing the receipt and the acknowledgement and getting the notice to the challenger is one thing. But to the point that Janine made about kind of the rationale, if you will, of, kind of what we're basing our decisions on or how we're viewing those. I don't know that you would normally have those in a procedural document. That type of information wouldn't necessarily be in a procedural document. I don't know that it should be here. That's kind of my first, kind of knee-jerk reaction, to that comment, because that's what you were inquiring about, right, Janine?
I wasn't sure exactly what you were looking for in a procedure, and so I put together an administrative procedure document.
Right.
But I wasn't sure if that was what you needed, or if you were looking for more of something that talked about the different laws that you might consider when making your decisions and that sort of thing.
Right. No, I think, if you look at any kind of, from my perspective, if you look at any kind of procedural, like, laws of civil procedure, it tells you, okay, a lawsuit's filed against you, you got to file an answer in 30 days, but there's nothing with regard to kind of the substance of how you resolve whatever that dispute is. I don't know that we would include that here. I know when I made the request, it was about having some type of document that is at the ready, that could be provided to a challenger, that we could have for our reference, you could have for your reference, that keeps us all honest, because these are kind of pretty quick turn times. But yeah, nothing substantive. That I hadn't envisioned including anything substantive here. It's all procedural.
My only thought, and I don't know how we would where that would exactly fit, but something about standardizing what information is presented to us, like what we accept as proof, right? What we, I feel like we're getting information that doesn't cite sources or tell us where it's coming from. I do feel like we need some sort of like standard for documenting, what kind of documents we accept to be presented.
I need to reread this section. Then you're, I think under the law, someone could just, as long as they get proper
Yeah.
notice, could just stand up without any documents and, testify. I think they're allowed to come in and say, my neighbor moved and I'm still getting his mail, and he still keeps getting, that's allowed. And so I think you have to probably, as a board, accept that. But that just all goes to credibility and what
Right.
you consider as a board, to be relevant evidence. I don't know how much you can, you could probably put things in there like, greater weight will be given to, certain kind of, but I would rather the board not.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to document all the things that you could or couldn't consider at one of these hearings.
Go
Well,
ahead, and I'll wait.
And the other thing is that because these are related to different states, it appears like each state has their own equivalent of my voter page that doesn't have the same information. And so how could we define that when we don't know which state it's coming from?
Maybe at this point, we really just need to emphasize in general that a 229 challenge is that the burden is on the challenger, something along those lines. Because I don't think the work should come back then to the county to standardize all of that, which is basically what's happening, right? So like we have 4 voter challenges that are coming up, and that generates a volume of work back to the county as if we're doing it the way we've been doing it. So I would say that we do then need something that says, sort of reiterates that 229 burden of proof on the challenger, and that the county is not, we don't have to provide additional support for those challenges.
I will say, I don't know that we're providing additional support. I think we're doing our diligence with regard to, I mean, to me, and maybe I'm looking at this as too much of a lawyer, but, someone makes an allegation or, raises a dispute, the other party has, in my opinion, an obligation to kind of make a reasonable inquiry to address that dispute. I mean, to me, it's no different than, like, if we were, and I believe this may have been at least how we, the meeting that I didn't attend, that there was a lot of conversation, a lot of discourse, and, kind of looking at this body as kind of almost, a judicial body, if you will, a governing body. We have I think, a legal obligation to make a reasonable inquiry. I do agree with Daniel in as much that I don't think that we should codify in this procedural document the things that are, I mean, we can give examples of the type of information that we consider. I'm not in the opinion of that we shouldn't make a reference to this will be given XYZ weight versus this given XYZ weight. All that does to me is invite additional inquiry and, potential tension and issues. And I don't believe that would be a prudent decision on our part.
I think Jennifer was right on the burden of proof should be on
Right.
the.
And I think that could be in the preamble. I mean, we note, and it's noted here, the code section reference, when you could just incorporate it into the preamble, that we are adopting these, this voter qualification challenges requirements, process and procedure is being adopted as, in such that we can comply with obligations under, section XYZ. There are ways that you can do that without going into kind of, you can make a reference to a burden of proof, but you don't have to go into kind of this evidence will be given this weight versus this evidence given that weight, or for that matter, delineating what evidence will be accepted versus what won't.
Daniel, would you restate the option that you offered to adopt this today versus waiting? Because I know that we have hearings that will be coming up, but in light of this conversation, I hesitate to accept this today. But would you restate?
Yeah, I think you could adopt the procedures as drafted by Janine and presented today in substance, with the stipulation that further formatting and grammatical, changes can still be made by council and staff.
As well as us.
As well, yeah, with your input.
Okay.
I mean, you're getting into if you get too much feedback and make too much changes, then you're talking about, are you approving the original document? So you really want to stick to formatting and grammar and things like that, not adding new requirements or things like that. So, which is why I was saying, I think you could approve this as today, subject to being cleaned up by legal counsel and staff, which is fine. But what I want to make sure you understand is that if there's something you need to address, like an overall cap, that needs to be mentioned today, because that's like a new rule you're putting in place. But if we're just clarifying things and putting in preambles and saying this is why we're adopting this, because we want to make sure people know the burden isn't up here, that's fine. But you don't want to adopt a new rule just based on feedback. That any procedural rules you're putting in place need to be subject to a vote today or revision at a later meeting.
What are our options with respect to approving these via email? I don't think that we can we?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I'm comfortable adopting these today, because to me, they're more than just grammatical errors. Will versus may, that's a change in a substantive right. To me, that's not grammar. Either you will have something or you may have something. May is permissive. Will is you're entitled to it, or shall is you're entitled to it. To me, that's not grammar. So
So what are you proposing, Doug?
I mean, I know July the 11th, that's our next meeting. We have a number of challenges. We've already provided notice of that meeting,
Yes, we have.
so it's not like we would have had the opportunity to include these anyway. I mean, we could subsequently, but the official notice, as referenced in here, has already been provided to the challenger, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just, if you want, I've got 13 changes noted, and if you think that addresses everything and you want to adopt it subject to those 13 changes, if there's anything else you wanted to do, we can do that today. I can go through them one by one if you want to do it, and
For me, I need to read it.
okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
That's.
And I'm sorry, I didn't get the agenda until today, so.
No, I
It's
knew,
no
I
worries.
just figured I would add that in to say that for me, I'm not ready to adopt.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Disagree with her.
I agree.
I like I think it's great. I just feel like we have to digest a little bit further.
Of course. So my question would be then, on the 11th, do you want to then just at that time set time limits and things like that
Yeah.
prior to people speaking?
I think that we can, and I mean, obviously well, maybe not so obviously for those that are here with us, but for those of us on this board and for you and for Daniel, you know that we're dealing with a larger number of challenges than we've seen before that have been asserted by each challenger. And in that instance, I believe that there are 4 challengers that are presenting, 3 or 4.
There's 4.
4. So this is a completely different, we're moving into a completely different world, a completely different dynamic. We've had 1 challenger per hearing, 1 alleged, I think 4, the other alleged 6. I think over the course of the 4 challengers that we'll be hearing from in July, it's upward of 100.
I think it's like 181 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So we're kind of in a new world.
Yeah.
So honestly, I think having the benefit of having that conversation, I think we can set at the outset of the hearing some parameters, but we can then determine what those parameters work. I think it's an apples to oranges comparison, and I want to see how these apples work out compared to how I know how the oranges have worked out before I set that. But I defer to the majority.
I think for July, we definitely need, because we have 4 challenges, we have a significant
Right.
increase in voters, we need to have time limits. We could maybe discuss that today, and then look at these for maybe a vote in
And I think
July
we
or
see how
August.
those time limits work, because
Right.
we've not experienced what we're going to experience
True,
in
good
July.
point.
So I think we can identify time limits today or agree to time limits today that will be applicable July the 11th. We see how they work on July the 11th. We adopt these as revised, incorporate the correct time limits based upon or what we believe to be the correct time limits based upon our experience, and go from there.
I like that.
Gentlemen, any questions,
So
comments?
are you saying we establish the time limits at the beginning of that meeting, or?
We can
today?
talk about it today. Yeah. I'm just going to push that for him.
I know.
What I heard Daniel say is he suggested that we adopt the time limits today so that they would be in effect, so that the challengers and the public could know what those time limits are, and not suddenly they come to a meeting and.
Well, let me clarify. So you, as a board, you're allowed to you could come in today and say, hey, we only have this room until 4 o'clock.
Right.
So you're allowed to do that on the day of the meeting. But if you're going to publish rules that go forward that apply to every meeting,
Right.
then that's when you need to adopt, it's sort of like adopting bylaws or adopting procedures, because you want to have something approving that. There's no reason you have to today say, well, we have 181, we need to divide this, let's give each, group 20 minutes to handle the whole thing,
Right.
You can decide that today, but that's not something you need to vote on. You can, as a board, say, this is the time we have to commit to this today. But if you're going to adopt something as a rule going forward,
Right.
as opposed to just how we're going, and those, keep in mind, those rules are going to be adopted and hopefully, provided to people, as these challenges keep coming, even on days you can still make motions to
Revisit them.
change the rules and for good cause. But you
Right.
just
So
want,
in the absence of adopting this today, we do not have to identify the time limits. We can do that on the day of, July the 11th, just the way we announce, hey, for individuals that might be new to this process, that you have 5 minutes during kind of your public comment session at the time that we commence that portion of the meeting that addresses the hearing. We can just share that with them then. Anything further on the
I just wanted to correct
proposed-
myself. It's 161, just to correct, just so the
Yeah,
correct
I knew it was
number.
upward of 100.
Just to correct it.
Anything further on kind of our policies and, well, our procedures for
So we're not going to set time limits today?
today?
For July
No, I don't
11th.
think,
Cool.
because, well, based upon what we just heard, we don't need to in the absence of adopting this. We can do that at the outset of the meeting. Okay.
So then we'll deal with this after the comments from the people, or, after we finish with the
I think so. I mean, it's not the smoothest and the cleanest way to run the meeting, but I think if during the course of next month's meeting, the hearings take place and we are addressing 161 electors that are being challenged, that's
Right.
very different than addressing the
Right.
6 or the 5. I think we'll have a better sense of how to manage time and time that we should allow for the conversation, such that we can make an informed suggestion. I think we're just kind of shooting in the dark here as to what would be an appropriate time limit.
So prepare to stay a little longer.
Yes, that is the long and short of it. You're right.
Okay.
We only have how much time here anyway?
I think it's 3 to 5. Good job.
Yeah, yes, that's,
Way to
yes,
go.
My
yes,
button
yes,
is on.
I think we can do it.
I had a question, if we are able, or there's two different things. One is public comment. The other is time for the challenger to present
good
their
point.
case.
Oh, yeah, those are absolutely different things.
Right. So do we need to establish a time limit on the case presentation?
I mean, we can, but again, I mean, do you know what an appropriate time limit is?
No,
Because again,
of
we've
course
never
not.
had someone bring 81 challenges in
Right.
one
But
sitting.
also who's showing up.
Exactly.
Okay.
I just don't believe that we have experience managing these challenges.
Right.
Because again, it's apples to oranges. 4 challenges versus, or 6 electors being challenged versus 80 being challenged by 1 challenger.
So if it's longer than we think it's going to be, we can take a break and go to Steve's house for dinner.
There
What
you
the
go.
heck?
Somehow I don't think the challengers nor anyone else is going to agree to that, but duly noted, Pat.
Sorry.
Anything further on this, on the procedural way that we will handle the challenges? Okay. But I do encourage everyone to read it as it's presently drafted and provide comments to Janine.
Now, you said Daniel couldn't send us a copy of what he was going to clean it up to look like, right? Is that right?
yes, I will send that to you this week.
Okay.
I'll send you a revised
Yeah.
version this week.
That's what I'd like to see.
I think that's helpful. Okay. If there's nothing further with regard to the voter challenge and procedures, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, board member comments. The majority of which has probably
I think
been
we've
aired.
commented.
Any comments? Jennifer or Jessica?
I just wanted to say that I thought the primary runoff went very smoothly. I enjoyed working in the West Park office with the team, and I think that everybody really was working smoothly to run a first-rate election. I mean, I think we're on track to be really smooth for November, and it was just a really nice opportunity. So thank you.
Likewise. Go ahead. Mhm.
I just wanted to add that we now have all 3 of our division manager positions filled. So I'd like to commend my two that are here, Erica Hamilton and Kara Pringle, who is the registration manager and elections manager respectively, have done a great job.
And it was a pleasure to work with, I echo Jennifer's sentiments. It was a pleasure to work with you all last week.
They did a great job on the recount as well.
Anything further from board members? Hearing none, I'll just go ahead and announce our next scheduled board meeting, as if we don't know. We've been making reference to it, July the 11th at 3 p.m., same place. Daniel, is there a need or to go into executive session?
I would like to do a short one about the school board case. The school districts, our answer is due, and that one coming soon. I may get an extension, but I would like to get some direction from the board about that case.
Certainly. We'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I make a motion.
For pending, purposes of pending litigation. So just add that to your motion.
Litigation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded to move into executive session for purposes of pending litigation. All of those in favor? None opposed. So at this time, so the motion passes. At this time, we will have to clear the chambers to go into executive session. You'll be invited back in at the conclusion. We'll entertain a motion to come out of executive session as it was held to discuss pending litigation.
I make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. All those in favor coming out of executive session? Unanimously passes. Going back to the agenda, we've already noted that the July 11th meeting is our next scheduled board meeting, and with that, we'll adjourn today's meeting.